Good evening, everyone. Welcome back for your spring breakers. It is Monday, April 25th. It is the Finance Committee for the Stratford Public Schools, and we have a quorum, so I will call the meeting to order. First on our agenda, we have an acceptance of minutes from our meeting March 28th, and I'd like to make a correction. It's 2022, not 2021. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, Mrs. Mangini, would you like to present to us the budget transfer on the agenda?
Sure. Good evening. Is this on? No. Okay. I'll find it eventually, ma'am. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, I know that in your packets you have the breakdown of budget transfer as we promised you would be getting that this month. Just a little bit of an overview. As we had stated at the beginning of the school year, we closely monitor all of the salary and benefit accounts, and as we move throughout the fiscal year and positions unfortunately aren't filled for a variety of reasons, we do track those savings, and earlier in the year, I think twice already now, we have brought you a transfer and we do put it into the salary reserve line. That's something new, a new account that we put together last year in hopes of being more transparent, and quite frankly, it even helps us to know, rather than, okay, I know that this balance on this line is savings, it's very clear. We take those dollars, we put it into this reserve fund within our general operating budget. What you have before you this evening is not only movement into the salary reserve fund, but also cleaning up of some accounts. We often have teachers that perhaps had moved from one grade level to another. Right now, most of what you're seeing as far as housekeeping adjustments are because we may have hired somebody at more or less than the previous person who resigned. So that's primarily what you're seeing, and Susan Nicholson did a tremendous job with giving you a lot of information, and I hope adequate information to help you understand the movements. Admittedly, some of it might be with some abbreviations that might not be as clear, so I'm happy to address any questions. But after we make the movements from the various accounts, we have a balance of I wrote it on the other page, $635,185.34, which will go to the salary reserve fund.
Questions?
Yeah. So regarding the salary reserve fund, I know we have deficits and other line items. I think we currently have, prior to any transfers, we have $892,000 currently in the salary reserve fund. If we did move the $635,000, we'd have $1.6 million in the salary reserve fund. I think in one of your projections, and I'm not quite sure, but it said you're projecting a $1.3 million surplus in this salary line item.
I'm not exactly following you, so let me just pull my financial report. Salary reserve account right now has $892,668, which I believe is what you stated.
Yep.
And we're adding to that the $635,000, which will give us about $1.5 million. And my and once we discuss the financial report, I will show you how that adjustment breaks down for a total of a deficit, but a much lower deficit for the year-end balance than I projected last month.
Right, but you so in your report you have 1.33 million, I think is the number. So let's find that page. We have 1.33, approximately 1.3 million as a projected year-end surplus in the salary line item. And I'm just wondering why we're putting it into the salary reserve fund and not putting it towards the special ed budget that already is showing a significant surplus. It seems like we're putting it in there and not paying our bills.
No,
Why don't
no.
we put it to the line item that needs the money?
Excellent, excellent point. We are paying the bills and those lines are running a deficit, and the only reason that we have not made the transfer into those accounts yet is because, first of all, there's not enough money, and secondly, as Ms. Borges will tell you, those accounts are changing on a daily basis. So rather than come to you 4 times for the same account, we were just waiting to at least let another month go by, because don't forget, this is reflective of March 31st. We've already had some movements with additional outplaced students. Oftentimes we find out the kids might be absent, so there's some, from a couple of days, there's some savings there. We change transportation providers on occasion, savings there. So there's plus and minuses in those accounts constantly, and we did discuss this with our auditors because they encouraged us not to run deficit accounts, but we had a very in-depth conversation about special education, and they perfectly understood as long as we were very transparent in our reporting, and obviously we are.
Well, I mean, why don't we take the 635 and pull another, 365 out of the overly funded salary reserve account, and put that towards special ed? So we're not running such a big deficit over there, and so that, I'm sure the deficit we have is not just projected. I'm sure there's some unpaid bills. Why don't we pay those bills?
There are no unpaid bills. I can assure you that every single bill is paid promptly. And again, we run the account in the deficit, and the reason it's in the deficit is because we have paid those bills. But I'll be happy to bring to you next month a transfer into some of the special ed accounts.
Well, why don't we just do it tonight, or not transfer this into that account and put it? You said you didn't want to come back 4 times. Now we're coming back 2 times to do something we can just take care of tonight. Whatever, just seems a little.
I will do
different.
whatever the finance committee and board's pleasure is. I just will tell you that we felt this was the best practice, and we did discuss it with the auditors. But I'm fine with either way.
Mrs. Vidal?
So just to clarify through Mrs. Chair, Madam Chair, that salary reserve account will then be taken and dispersed among the accounts next month or in June or whenever it is to pay down those deficits. So it will be used for that. It's not going to be handed back to the town.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions regarding the budget transfer?
Perhaps, Board Member Hendrick, maybe you can maybe expand a little bit on that proposal, that suggestion. Is there a rationale behind that?
Well, Ms. Mangini said that the bills are paid, which is creating the deficit, which would mean, I don't know if it's the same thing here, but typically you're not allowed to do internal transfers without the board doing it. So there's been some transfers that have been made already into the special ed line item in order to pay those bills that have created the deficit. So either one of 2 things have happened. We've transferred funds already into that account to pay the bills, or those bills haven't been paid yet. So instead of putting these into a fund that has no real, I understand the purpose of it, but it's excess funds. And to me, it would seem to make more sense to make that money useful than leave it in a debt account that's not being touched.
I don't disagree with that logic. I think, but I think it's probably not the prudent way to go about it. To Ms. Mangini's point, there is no transfer that has been moved here without the board's approval. That's very clear. As I understand this, though, I understand that the deficits we're running right now with special education, there is a direct impact on excess cost rate. And I'm not sure if you were trying to make a recommendation based on how special education costs directly impacts ECG. But we're doing things as transparently as possible. We're connecting with the auditors. We're going against their advice, because one of the biggest things that this board and this distribution team is going to be committed to is transparency. So we're always going to bring things through this committee to the full board for approval before making any kind of significant move. Ms. Mangini, did I miss anything on that?
No, I just think it's important to further note, and I do understand where Mr. Hendrick is coming from. And on the town side, things are done a little bit differently. Don't forget, as a Board of Education, we're one line on the town's budget. So I think we just need to be reminded that when you see, for example, a 1.688 deficit in the 500 object code on my financial status report, a lot of that is still encumbered. It's not all checks actually written, but regardless, we have been very clear that we more than likely will run a deficit this year. And we have been trying to get our excess cost grant, which would probably just the overage that the town received that they did not anticipate would probably make us whole at this point.
And then if I could also ask you, so on your financial status report, you have a $1.332,853,000 surplus. Is that your projected? So if we transfer this, we're gonna have about 1.6 million in there, and your surplus says 1.3. Is that 300,000 intended to go towards other salaried positions? Is that why we're putting so much in there?
The salary amount there is including already the money that we're asking you to move this evening. So you'd have to reduce the 1.3 million by the 635,000 that we're putting into the salary reserve fund. Again, it's a point in time. This is March. We would not have made any of these adjustments until they're board approved. So your financial status report is not inclusive of this transfer.
So then the projected balance, you have 1.3 million. If we then increase that by 600,000, wouldn't that get us?
Not increase, reduce.
Why would it reduce if it's?
Our salaries, the 1332, and you know what, I did misspeak, I apologize. The 1332 projected balance is taking your total salary reserve. It's taking the 892 that's in there and the 635, and then it's offset by something, so I'm going to have to go back and check.
So I'm just curious, is the final number 2 million if we add it in now, or is it 1.6 minus the 1.3, which is saying that before the end of the year, we're going to spend 300,000 in the salary reserve fund?
Yeah, I'm not quite following you. Perhaps if we can get, I don't know if this is contingent upon your vote for the transfer, but I would like to go through the financial status report.
I was just going to suggest maybe we move to the next line item
Okay,
and then
good.
readdress the budget transfer after that. It just seems to flow easier, and some of these questions might be answered by your presentation.
Sounds good, thank you. So, I did misspeak, I apologize. The 1332853 is due to the salary reserve, both the pending transfer this evening and what's in there already. And then it is offset by some of the funds that are in that account, such as what we have set aside for our, in the 112 account, for the school resource officers that the town just does an adjusting entry. The benefits account is reflective of a year-end balance as a result of trending positively in unemployment. And of course, when you have a balance in salaries, you have corresponding balance in FICA. So there's some savings there. And I did note that we do anticipate some balance, at least it appears to be, in dental insurance. Dental insurance is the only thing that we have that's self-insured, so we just pay directly as claims come in, so it's rather challenging at times to estimate what that will be by year end. And historically in our district, April, May, and June are the busiest times. I have a feeling a lot of people had dental appointments last week, so we're waiting one more month to, yeah, we're waiting one more month. But we do anticipate some savings there that we will report to the board next month. And then property services, right now we seem to be trending right on budget. Other purchase services is our outplacement tuition, as well as our workers' comp that is also trending negatively at this time, and transportation. So when you consider all of those accounts, that is our projected deficit balance that we are anticipating for those accounts. Supplies and materials I've spoken about all year, and we are working towards saving $250,000. If you look at all of this in totality, currently our financial position for year end is an anticipated or projected deficit of $750,000, $749. Quite frankly, I see that being reduced. So we're moving in the right direction. We continue to analyze all of our salaries because obviously each month that goes by that we cannot fill a position, there's additional savings. So we'll continue to report that to you. And Mr. Henrik, I don't know if that answers your question. I hope it helps anyway.
Well, it gets there, but. And I did have some other questions about some of the other line items.
Sure.
In the report, if now is the appropriate time.
Is that okay? Do you want
Fine
to show
with
the
me.
presentation?
No, that's basically all I really wanted to explain about that.
Go ahead.
So the utilities line item.
Yeah.
We've had some significant funds left over, unexpended funds in there. Gassy, which I would like to believe that we won't be heating our buildings much longer, but we've expended about 2/3 of that budget, and we're well beyond the heating season. And electricity is a significant number, 660,000 remaining. Do you anticipate a surplus in those line items?
I truly don't, and we do analyze these. We have a couple of our schools for electricity that are actually running higher. And I think what you have to bear in mind is that while this may be reflective through March, chances are we've only received the invoices probably halfway through January at this point. So they're always a little bit behind in giving us our invoices. So we are constantly tracking those. The natural gas, again, we've had, and I apologize, I can't remember which schools, but we've had one or two, might have been Bengel, who's really running high, and I know that Rich Ruggiero is looking into that. And we do have a couple of locations that are running lower. I think overall, we've had a pretty average winter as far as heating days.
Sure.
It's been not as bad as far as storms, but we've had some really cold spells. So I think we're seeing the first year since I've been here that it's been kind of average. People are actually in the buildings. And it is our first real year with Stratford High School having people in the building ever since it's been expanded. And that was very difficult to estimate because we really didn't have any data when I arrived here. So we were really underfunded for electricity. I actually think we might have a little wriggle room there, but it's going to offset another location.
And I would assume that's a gas heat building?
No, it's actually heated by electricity for most of it. Bengel is gas.
All right, that's about all I had on that. Thank you.
Are there other questions for Mrs. Nadine? Okay, so Dr. Clemmy, grants update?
Sure. Good evening, board members.
I'm sorry, can we just make sure the transfer is going to move forward to?
Do you want to do it now, or do you want to put it as number 5 under?
Oh, okay, that's fine. I just don't want to forget it. Yeah.
I just noted to myself,
Thank
bottom of the.
you. You're on top of it. I should have known. Sorry, Kevin.
Sorry. So, good evening, board members, Dr. Sunday, everybody else who's here. You have the grant report in your packet, and there are 2 changes this month besides the numbers being updated. Those are always updated for you. One is we got a grant that I listed last time as a single grant, but I told you that it was really 3 different grants in one application. It was called the ESSER 2 Special Education Recovery Grant. And since we have the final numbers now, I've broken that down into the 3 different grants. So you'll see that listed here as the ESSER 2 Special Education Recovery Grant, the ESSER 2 Special Populations Grant, and the ESSER 2 Dyslexia Grant. The other change is that we had one new grant that came in March, and that is the ESSER 2 Homeless Children and Youth Grant, which is going to be used to pay partially staff that help homeless children and students in the district as they come back into the school. In progress at the moment, we have several grants going. We have the IDEA grant for fiscal year 23. We have the IDEA preschool grant for fiscal year 23. And we are looking at a School Violence Prevention Program grant that was just announced by the U.S. Department of Justice. I've had a brief discussion with the police department about that, and you have to be partners with the police department to go after that grant. And the details come out Wednesday at a webinar, so I will be attending that webinar. And lastly, we've started working on the first really big ESSER grant reporting that we have to do. The state has released the guidelines for what data we have to collect and report. They haven't put the portal up yet that you use to report it. That's supposed to happen in mid-May, and we have to turn all of our data in by mid-June. So we've started working with each of the schools to put that data together on how their ESSER funds have been used, how many students were served, things like that. And lastly, we turned in March 2 grants. We turned in the school readiness grant that funds 3 of our preschool classrooms. That has already been renewed and by the local school readiness council, and is now up at the state at OEC being gone through their process for approval. And we turned in the mandated adult education grant, and we are waiting to hear back from the state on that, but don't expect to have any difficulties. Any questions?
Yes, this is Dawn. Thank you for that. You mentioned a new school violence prevention program grant, and
Yes.
we're getting details. I see one on our list now. Is it different from that one, or? Is
It's the 2 years later iteration of the same grant.
Okay. And then the Essa reporting, that'll be, I'm sorry, one more question. Okay. The Essa reporting that is going to be due next month will be
Well,
for
by
the.
June, yeah.
Okay, by June. Will be for just the first Essa grant that's ending?
Well,
Or will it be for all?
So the way they've set it up, it's all 3 of the big ESSER grants, ESSER, ESSER 2, and ARP ESSER.
Okay.
But the time frame for the first report only covers ESSER 2 and the very first couple of months, or ESSER 1 and the very first couple of months of ESSER 2.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and this question is maybe for Dr. Sunday to pass through to maybe Dr. Gata. But can we maybe at some time get like a presentation about some of these grants, like how we're using them, what programs we're initiating with them? Because again, we want to advocate, right, some of these things, but we also want to understand what we have being offered in our district.
Excuse me, I'll connect with my team, maybe we can put something together.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Clinton? Okay, thank you very much. Special education report, Mrs. Borges.
So Ms. Mangini pretty much touched on everything already. As you guys can see, we have been, if you've noticed over the last couple months, been trending with the same number of out-of-district placements. That doesn't mean those are the same students. Some come in, some go out, but we haven't had any stark increases. As students have been outplaced, other students have returned to district. So we've been maintaining about that same amount. And I'm working on the IDA grant right now with Mr. Clemmy, and we'll get that all finished up before May. But there's no, nothing else that's a surprise. It's pretty much similar report to what you guys have been seeing. And I don't know, Pam, if this helps but some of the reason I think that you guys started that account where you were putting everything in is so we could be more transparent, because special education is constantly ebb and flowing. It was hard for the finance committee, I think, in the past to keep up with all the transfers happening all the time and to make sure they were appropriately being transferred to special education. So I think that's why the decision was made to have one account so that it would then all happen at once instead of up and down all year long, because we are a roller coaster.
It was definitely a roller coaster years historically.
Yes.
Were there any questions for Ms. Borges?
So, Ms. Borges, so what you're saying, it would be a smoother transaction for you guys if we transferred it all into the reserve fund and pulled it all out at one time? Or?
I think at one time is easier for us because I can't promise anybody what happens from month to month, and I think it makes all of your jobs harder to track it instead of like the auditors are allowing us to run in the red and then have you guys fix it all in May, or June when we know where it's going to finally be, and where else maybe we can fix some savings. So I think that is easier in the long run for everybody to follow. It's heart-wrenching, right, for me every month to have to say that we're in a deficit, but it's also, I think, better in the long term for everybody to understand what we're looking at.
All right. And for me, just as long as people, the public, know that there are funds there, we're not running a $2.4 million deficit. We have you guys are, but that's one line, number one budget
Yeah.
item. You know, there is other funds that will offset some of that, and hopefully, and the closer we get to zero, the better, but if that's a better way, then I know Ms. Mangini said that the accountant guy said it would be just as well.
Yeah.
So, okay, all right.
I'll add to that, in any other typical year, we would be running a deficit. If those savings were not here, because of those vacancies, we would be running a deficit. So it's important to make sure that's noted on the record.
Well, that's where my mind goes out of concern, because it's not typical. And, you know, hopefully next year's school year is a fully staffed, fully in-person, normal type. And so we really have to be cautious about finding this luck again. Okay, any other questions?
And I don't know if there's a time, just I know in reference to the staffing shortages, if you go online and look at and I'll ask it now instead of at the regular meeting, but if you go online, there are, I would say, not a lot of positions posted, not a lot of teaching positions. Is that because of, why aren't we advertising for, to fill those vacant positions at this point?
We're advertising those positions every day, and perhaps this is probably better suited for the regular meeting. At that point, I'll call on Courtney Brown to be able to speak about it. But
Okay.
HR office every day sends out notices. Brianna Torres does a good job of that. If there are specific numbers you're looking for, we'd be happy to answer those questions.
Right. Yeah, I didn't know if I should ask it now or later, but yeah, I went online and looked and didn't see a lot of those positions, so I was just curious where they. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Ms. Borges? Okay, so I will read the budget transfer as proposed. Proposed transfer is to adjust salary and benefit accounts in Object 111, 112, and 200 for various reasons such as resignations, new hires, transfers, maternity leaves, and salary reclass adjustments, as well as anticipated fringe benefit savings. Transfer in Object 300 for shortfall in professional and technical services. Further details provided on the budget transfer. Residual available balance will be moved to the salary reserve account. Total budget transfer amount proposed is $768,000, $479.91. I will entertain a motion to approve this budget transfer.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, I'll do a roll call. Ms. Lance?
Yes.
Mr. Henrik?
Yes.
Ms. Bedell?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Corcoran?
Yes.
Mrs. Carol Fabian?
Yes.
And Mrs. Coopy?
Yes.
And chair votes yes. Unanimous pass. Okay. And enrollment status.
Actually, we are currently up 152 students from last year at this time, and 96 students from our October 1 count. I would love to tell you that I think it's kind of leveling off, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Our registrations continue, and I think as we get closer to the end of the school year, surprisingly, things are a little bit different here than other districts I've been in. Ms. Borges had kind of given me a heads up when I got here that usually by October, November, things quiet down. It's all year. So it's fine, we've adjusted, but every time that we do give you the report, obviously there are changes up and down. And of course now we're finishing up the real blast for kindergarten registration, and that's been going very well. So we'll continue to update you on all of those various actions as well.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Coopy?
So, Ms. Mangini, you mentioned our student population is up 152. Do you have data on what grade levels those students are in or came into? Also, can you explain how our population changes because we have a lot of kids in elementary, middle school who go to private school, right? But then they'll come into our high schools. How does that affect our numbers, and how do we count that?
We can definitely pull that information with some of the private schools, because we do know where they're coming from, so we could pull that. I don't have numbers for you now, but with regard to the first part of your question, actually that information more or less is reflected on this report. If you look, for example, at elementary, you'll see Chapel last year at this time had 300, they're up to 320.
Okay.
And I think that information for the most part is here on the report, but we can certainly try to gather some info to help better understand students coming from the private school. We also have many from 8th grade and 9th grade that move on to private schools or VOAG schools as well. They are allowed to go to some of the schools in Trumbull and Bridgeport, so we do lose some as well.
Okay. Thank you.
But we'll get that information for you.
Yeah, to answer the question, the vast amount of our enrollments are coming in at the elementary level. It's rare, to your point, kids do transition into choice schools as they get older based on their interest. This is a conversation we're having at the most recent plan is taking a look at our numbers against some of those demographic studies and physical plant studies. This is work that has to be on the horizon because our numbers are continuing to trend north. So there's more to do there.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand, right? So let's say there's a X percentage of them in private school. Do we get a boom, right, at the high school level, and how do we account for that? And again, like you said, having those conversations and planning, just getting that data as well to inform, how we
I can speak from experience, maybe not specifically for Stratford, but when you talk about secondary age kids coming back from choice programs, unless there's a specific DNA signature program that we offer, it typically doesn't happen that much.
Got it, okay.
So you'll see, a handful of kids who may come back, typically because their peers, the kids they grew up with in the same neighborhood, they want to graduate with. They want to do the last 3 years of high school with. But you don't typically see that influx of 40 or 50 kids coming from choice programs back to the public schools because they went there for specific reasons, right? But part of that process, we always talk about this in education, is we want to do our best to make sure we keep our kids within our town limits, right? And for that to happen, sometimes, because we know all of our kids have a wide range of interests, for that to happen, sometimes we have to be able to design niche programs that keep them here. So we're not paying dollars out, we're keeping those dollars here in town.
Great for magnet schools.
Well, magnet school. Just trying to get the budget passed.
I can dream.
Mr. Henry?
I just have one quick question. You had mentioned kindergarten signups or registrations moving forward. Do you have any sense, or is there a historical perspective, how we're tracking as the years in past?
As far as the numbers of registrations, yeah, we definitely have that information and we can provide it. We do have kindergarten numbers from each year, and
Right.
it's easy enough to put that together.
But and maybe if you could just email it out, just so we can get a sense as to how the incoming kindergarten class is looking in comparison to years past, and is it tracking along with the increased numbers of the higher elementary grades?
And we will get a lot more registrations over the summer, but
Okay.
definitely we'll take a
But
look
just
at
even
that.
tracking, so we get a sense,
Yes.
Thank you.
Mrs. Adele, did you have a question?
That was my question, thank you.
Oh. Great minds.
Were there any other questions regarding enrollment? Any old business? New business? Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn at 7:04 p.m.
So moved.
Second? Okay, adjourn. Thank you.